Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up because what just happened in Washington, D.C. is not another headline, not another political story, not another debate on cable news. No, this is the moment that America flipped overnight. One Supreme Court ruling detonated a chain reaction that's now ripping through every blue city, every state house, every election office, and every migrant processing center in the country. This fallout is only just beginning. Now, for years, we were told that the system couldn't change. Birthright citizenship, untouchable. Racial impact redistricting, permanent. Migrant voting vulnerabilities, just a myth. Deportations, impossible. But under President Donald J. Trump, the Supreme Court said no more. And instantly, states launched emergency crackdowns on non-citizen voting. Voter rolls are being purged in real time. ICE has activated its largest enforcement surge since the 1950s. And blue cities are drowning in migrant-related spending. They're now sounding the alarm. We can't survive this. The media is panicking. Democrats are scrambling. Bureaucrats are stunned because the court didn't just rule on a map. It rewrote the rules of the entire country. So stick with me, folks, because I'm about to break down exactly how this happened, why it's happening right now, and why this moment will be remembered as the night America's immigration system, voting system, and political map are shattered and rebuilt in a single sweep. This is the Supreme Court shockwave, and this is only just beginning. Hit the like button and subscribe, folks. All right, the shockwave started in Texas. This is where the Supreme Court quietly handed President Trump and the America First movement a victory that was so large, a victory that was so structural that most analysts still don't quite understand what just happened. With one ruling, SCOTUS reversed a lower court and allowed Texas to use its brand new congressional map. This is a map that Democrats insisted was racial gerrymandering, but the Supreme Court said something absolutely historic. Intent matters more than impact. So let me say that again, because this is the hinge moment of the entire political future of the United States. The court said legislators should be presumed to act in good faith, which means a map drawn for partisan advantage is no longer automatically illegal just because it affects racial groups differently. And so that standard right there, ladies and gentlemen, completely flips the battlefield for 2026. Texas gets five brand new Republican leading seats, okay? 5 brand new Republican leaning seats, and blue states can no longer hide behind racial impact arguments when they slice and dice conservative voters into oblivion. They're already doing this. And so now, for the first time in decades, Republicans are legally cleared to play the same game that Democrats have perfected over the years. And trust me, guys, every red state is watching this ruling like a cheat code. The Supreme Court didn't just approve a map. They just changed the rule of war. And so here's the part that the media is absolutely terrified to say out loud. This case was never about Texas. It was about SCOTUS sending a message, bold, loud, unmistakable. A message that the era of untouchable precedents is over. The same court that overturned Roe v. Wade after 50 years just cracked open another sealed vault. The willingness to interpret long-standing constitutional doctrines when those doctrines no longer reflect the reality of the nation. Now, for decades, we were told birthright citizenship can't be touched. The Voting Rights Act can never be questioned. Impact matters more than intent. Federal agencies decide everything, but this court, under a second Trump presidency, just declared that nothing is off the table. Not if it's unconstitutional, not if it's outdated, not if it's being exploited, and not if it undermines the sovereignty of American citizens. This is why Democrats are panicking, because if SCOTUS is willing to rewrite the rules on redistricting, then what else are they willing to revisit? What about birthright citizenship? What about voter eligibility? What about federal agencies acting without legislative authority? This ruling wasn't just a decision. This was a warning shot. A constitutional reset has begun. And look, when you see a Supreme Court ruling to revisit doctrines that everyone once called untouchable, when you see Washington losing its grip and states taking power back, you start to realize something deeper. The system can shift overnight, and it just did. And when the system shifts, the question becomes, what protects everything that you've built? I mean, you spent a lifetime building something, your home. You spent a lifetime building your savings, your family stability, your future. But here's a truth that most people never say out loud. None of that protects itself. Not in moments like this. Not when the political ground is moving under our feet faster than at any time in modern history. This is exactly why I partner with Noble Gold Investments. They help everyday Americans secure their wealth with physical gold and silver, real assets, not some digital promises. assets that don't care who's in Congress, assets that don't care what the Fed prints next or which way the court rules. And for most people, it's not about being convinced. It's about finally asking the real questions. Do I trust inflation to magically stop? Do I trust DC to suddenly get responsible? Do I trust Wall Street more than I trust myself? When people answer honestly, they're all saying the same thing. That makes sense. This is why thousands of Americans are calling the phone number at the bottom of your screen there, 877-646-5347, or they're visiting RonYatesGold.com right now to get their free wealth protection kit, because protecting what you built is not optional. It's your responsibility. And so now we get to the earthquake underneath all of this. This is the case that has Washington shaking. Now, for the first time since 1898, the Supreme Court has agreed to directly examine birthright citizenship. Now, let me be crystal clear here about this. This hasn't happened in 127 years. And the only reason why it's happening now is because President Donald J. Trump just issued the executive order that forced the issue onto the court's docket. Now, the media keeps pretending that this case is symbolic. It's not symbolic. The moment that the court agreed to hear it, rather than summarily rejecting it, they signaled that at least 4 justices believe that the meaning of subject to jurisdiction thereof is not as automatic as the political class has insisted for a century. Trump's argument is very simple. To receive automatic U.S. citizenship, a child must have at least one parent who is a lawful permanent resident, not someone here illegally, not someone on temporary status, not someone who crossed last week and after hearing a rumor on WhatsApp. Now, here's a kicker. This interpretation is not outside the mainstream. It's rooted in original intent. It's rooted in diplomatic exceptions. It's rooted in understanding that citizenship is a contract, not a loophole. The court didn't take this case to affirm the status quo. They took it because they're prepared to change it. To understand why this case is historic, you have to understand what birthright citizenship became over the last 6 decades. It transformed from a post-Civil War protection for freed slaves into the single most powerful magnet for illegal immigration in modern world history. Once word spread that having a child on U.S. soil guaranteed automatic citizenship and eventually anchored the parents here, every incentive was aligned toward exploiting that system. And exploit it they did. Families came knowing asylum courts were overloaded. They knew that by the time that their case was heard, sometimes years later, they'd have 1, 2, maybe 10 U.S.-born kids. And when that day finally comes, judges offered extraordinary leniency because these are American citizen kids. Biden's border surge from 2021 to 2025 threw gasoline on this fire. 25 million crossings in 4 years didn't happen randomly. It happened because migrants understood the formula. Get here by any means necessary, have a baby, wait out the courts, stay permanently. This is what created demographic shifts that reshaped cities, overwhelmed schools and hospitals, altered political landscapes, and pushed working class Americans to the brink. Birthright citizenship wasn't a policy, it was an accelerant. Now, the moment the Supreme Court signaled a shift in how it interprets citizenship, intent, and constitutional boundaries, states moved instantly. I'm talking about within hours, not weeks, not months. Secretaries of state, election boards, and governors, especially in swing states, activated emergency election integrity reviews. Because here's the truth that no one on the left wants to admit. The migrant surge of the last decade created vulnerabilities in the voter registration system that bureaucrats ignored. Now that era is over. States launched audits targeting non-citizen registrations, accidental or otherwise. They dug into the DMV's motor voter loopholes where citizenship status was never checked. They uncovered duplicate records, outdated entries, individuals who moved out of state years ago, and inactive voters who somehow just kept on receiving ballots. And with the Supreme Court shift, states feel protected for the first time in years. They are aggressively cleaning house because if birthright citizenship gets reinterpreted, then voter eligibility becomes the next chapter in defining who gets a voice in American democracy. Blue states are panicking. Red states are accelerating. Swing states are bracing for lawsuits. This isn't a routine bookkeeping cleanup. This is a nationwide purge of vulnerabilities that the establishment pretended didn't exist for years. And it's happening right now at lightning speed. So while election officials are scrubbing these voter rolls, the Department of Homeland Security under President Trump is executing a completely separate but equally massive operation. For the first time since like the 1950s, ICE is mobilizing a removal strategy that spans every region of the country, coordinated with state National Guard units and newly trained field teams. This is not some symbolic enforcement or a PR stunt. This is a logical surge. ICE has been instructed to prioritize overstayed visas, TPS holders whose protections expired, asylum cases proven fraudulent, post-Biden era entrants who never appeared for court dates. And behind the scenes, DHS is studying the model of Operation Wetback. This is the 1954 mass removal program, but updated with modern technology, biometric tracking, interstate coordination, and real-time data verification. Now, this shift is directly tied to the Supreme Court's posture. If birthright citizenship is reinterpreted and if citizenship is no longer a default for anyone who crosses the border, then the incentive to wait it out disappears. And ICE now has the legal and political backing to act decisively on this. Now, blue cities, they're already reporting spikes in voluntary departures. Advocacy groups are preparing lawsuits. Sanctuary jurisdictions are bracing for federal confrontation. This is not the old immigration system. This is a reset. Now, we need to talk about where the collapse is hitting the hardest. Blue cities, the cities that told America we can handle it, the cities that mocked border states, the cities that advertise themselves as sanctuary havens. They're now falling apart faster than anyone predicted, and this isn't political rhetoric. This is math. Cold, brutal math. New York City's migrant budget just blew past $4.5 billion with shelters overflowing, schools turning gymnasiums into overnight housing shelters. Chicago is slashing police overtime because migrant hotel contracts are draining emergency funds. Denver is warning of a fiscal cliff. Minneapolis, already drowning in crime, now reports that migrant healthcare is consuming hospital budgets that were already in crisis mode. And what caused this? A system built on birthright incentives, asylum backlog manipulation, and federal non-enforcement. Now, for years, these cities pretended that this was sustainable because Washington, under Biden, kept printing money to cover their mistakes. But under President Trump in 2025, the free ride is over. The free ride's done. Federal reimbursements have tightened, enforcement priorities have changed, and states aren't going to bankrupt themselves to subsidize sanctuary fantasies. So as ICE operations expand and birthright citizenship faces re-examination, cities that depend on perpetual inflows are now confronting the bill. They can't pay it. When the Supreme Court changes course, it doesn't just change the law. It changes how every governor, every state legislature, every agency, every political strategist in America behaves. And right now, SCOTUS's new posture has created nationwide panic inside state governments, especially in the Democrat-led states that rely on these old interpretations of citizenship, jurisdiction, and federal deference. Red states are moving with precision. They're tightening these election laws, requiring documented proof of citizenship for benefits, passing residency verification statutes, and rushing to reinforce cooperation with ICE. They already see the writing on the wall. They know the court is leaning toward restoring constitutional boundaries that Washington ignored for decades. Meanwhile, blue states are scrambling to pass these non-cooperation bills, trying to shield their cities before the legal ground shifts beneath them. Governors in California, Illinois, and New York are holding these emergency briefings with attorneys general, desperately searching for ways to block or even delay these deportation surges. Now, here's the tension the media refuses to acknowledge. States behave aggressively when they sense the Supreme Court is shifting the rules. And right now, that shift is unmistakable. The court isn't just reinterpreting redistricting. It is reinterpreting authority itself. America's power centers are being rearranged, and every state can feel the plates moving under their feet. This is a tectonic shift, folks. And what's happening right now isn't just a political movement. This is a once-in-a-generational constitutional realignment, because when the Supreme Court signals that it's willing to revisit anything from redistricting to birthright citizenship, it doesn't just affect those issues. It affects the entire balance of power between the federal government and the states. And with Chevron deference hanging by a thread, the court is making one thing very clear. Unelected federal agencies no longer get to run this country. This is federalism reborn. For decades, agencies like DHS, DOJ, and the Department of Education weaponized vague statutory language to impose rules, mandates, and interpretations that Congress never explicitly approved. States complained, sued, and protested, but they were powerless because courts deferred to the agencies almost automatically. Those days are ending. Now, states can assert real authority over immigration enforcement assistance, election administration, benefit eligibility, school policy, and even how they cooperate or even refuse to cooperate with federal directives. Trump's administration is already signaling support for the shift, encouraging states to take the lead where Washington failed. Democrat-run states, they hate this because this means that they can't hide behind the federal bureaucracy anymore. Red states love it because they finally have constitutional backing of government without federal interference. This isn't just decentralization. This is the return of the American system that the founders intended. So now we arrive at the heart of the storm. This is the question that almost every other issue points toward. Who is allowed to participate in American democracy? Who should vote? Who should be counted in district maps? Who qualifies as a citizen? Who receives taxpayer-funded benefits? Who shapes the future of the nation? Now, for decades, these questions were treated as settled, untouchable, beyond debate. But after the Supreme Court's December rulings, every single one of these pillars is back on the table, and this is why the political class is in a full-blown panic. If birthright citizenship is reinterpreted, it changes who becomes a citizen at birth. If voter roll purges expand, it changes who gets to cast a ballot. If states reclaim authority over election law, it changes who gets counted. If deportation surges increase, it changes who resides here long enough to influence policy. It all ties together. Democrats know demographic change has been their long-term strategy. They openly said it for years. The coalition of the future. But if the rules governing citizenship, residency, and voting are revised to reflect constitutional intent instead of political convenience, then entire foundations crack. This is not a debate over policy anymore. This is a battle over the definition of the American people. And now we get to the evidence. This is the part that the mainstream media is desperately trying to hide, because while politicians argue and activists panic, the ground truth is already changing fast. ICE field offices across the country are reporting a sudden surge in what they call voluntary compliance visits. Now, this is bureaucratic language for migrants showing up on their own to ask whether they should leave before enforcement finds them. Border crossings, for the first time in nearly a decade, are dropping sharply. Smugglers in Central America are slashing their prices because demand is collapsing. Countries like Honduras and Guatemala, they're preparing reintegration plans for returning nationals, and shelters in Los Angeles and Denver, yes, even in blue cities, they're seeing people quietly pack up and disappear because they're terrified of what the Supreme Court might rule next. This is what happens when the incentives flip. Now, for years, the message was, come here, you'll be processed, you'll have a baby, you'll stay, you'll blend in, you'll never be removed. Now the message, thanks to SCOTUS and the second Trump administration, is you may be allowed to stay, you may not become a citizen, you may not be shielded by a broken system anymore. Behavior changes long before laws officially change. And what we're seeing, what we're watching right now is that shift unfold in real time. And that brings us to the final piece of this political earthquake. The 2026 midterms. This is the election Democrats hoped to survive. Now it kind of looks like an extinction level event because every domino that we've discussed today, redistricting, birthright citizenship, voter roll purges, ICE mobilization, blue city collapse, all of it converges in one direction. Structural advantage shifting away from the left for the first time in decades. Texas alone gains multiple Republican seats. Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania are already reviewing their own maps. States are cleaning voter rolls like never before. Migrant inflows are slowing. Deportations are rising. And Democrats who relied heavily on demographic changes and lenient election frameworks, they're watching the foundation crumble beneath them. Even political analysts on CNN and MSNBC are admitting the truth. If the Supreme Court rules narrowly on citizenship and states continue these election reforms, Democrats face a generational setback. This is why the panic is so intense. This is why blue state governors are scrambling. This is why advocacy groups are filing lawsuits before the ink even dries on the new state laws. Because the game board has changed, the court changed it, the states changed it, the voters changed it, and President Trump is using every bit of political capital to enforce it. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2026 midterms will not just be another election. They will be the first election of a new political era. Hit the like button, subscribe, share this video who needs to understand what's really happening and the truth behind the news. We'll see you next time.